What is up, world? It's your boy Ton, and you are listening to the Wonton Wealth Podcast. Here, I'm going to unravel anything and everything commercial real estate related. And more importantly, we're going to add abundant value. So if you're ready, buckle up your eardrums. If you've been in the game long enough, chances are you've ran across a couple appraisals or have gone through a couple appraisals. Actually, I myself am going through an appraisal right now for a refi with the bank, and it's not all sunshine and rainbows. It's actually taking longer than expected. And, that's the beauty of it when you're working with banks, right? I know it doesn't sound like the most thrilling topic, but stick with me, and I promise you'll walk away with some golden nuggets of wisdom, and hopefully you can save some cash. So today we're going to be talking about appraisal. What the hell is an appraisal? In simple terms, an appraisal is a professional assessment of a property's value conducted by a licensed appraiser. Think of it as your trusty compass guiding you through fair purchase prices or rental rates. And that's why it's a super important part of commercial real estate. It's a third party assessing the valuation of a building so that you don't really, you can't just say, oh, my building's worth X. And the bank is like, no, your building's worth Y. Now, just like in residential properties, commercial real estate deals often will require that appraisal, especially when you're seeking loans from a lender. This ensures that the lender doesn't lend more than the property's fair market value. Now, commercial appraisers are going to go a bit deeper than residential ones because they consider the potential earning power of the property versus just comps. Comps stands for comparables. When you get a residential appraisal, these things are going to rely heavily on comps, like I mentioned, comparable properties, and commercial appraisals are going to take it a step further. They're going to be looking at how much money the property is generating, what their operating expenses are, and as it relates to the current market conditions. When they consider all of these aspects, commercial appraisers can provide a more accurate and comprehensive valuation of your property. So when you have the appraisal in hand, now you have a reliable benchmark for determining the true worth of a commercial property. And here I'm going to give you 3 big reasons why commercial real estate appraisals are super important. Firstly, it's going to determine the current market value of the day that the appraiser comes to look at your property. At the heart of every transaction is the question of the true value of the property in today's market. When you have a solid appraisal, you're not just going to be shooting in the dark. You're going to be equipped with knowledge that the appraiser has presented you, and you're going to be able to negotiate like a pro. Plus, now both you, hopefully being the buyer, and the seller have an unbiased valuation from a third party. Secondly, it gives a lot more confidence to your lenders. So they rely on these appraisals to protect their own investments. They don't want to loan money out to a property that's worth less. By that, I mean, okay, they don't want to loan out $2 million to you when they know the building's only worth $1 million because they're going to be $1 million in the hole already, right? For example, if you bought it for $1 million, the bank's going to lend you $2 million. Now you go to sell it, and let's say you sold it for $500,000. So now the bank's going to lose $1.5 million, right? Doesn't make any sense for them. So they also want an unbiased and accurate property valuation to help them ensure that the loan that they're giving is based on reality and not just some made up number. And lastly, commercial real estate appraisals are going to uncover the property's potential for generating income. They're going to once again figure out the gross income, the operating expenses, and then figure an NOI based on that. But that's not where they stop. They're also going to be looking at what the market is telling them, what the current lease rates are in the property, what the conditions of the current vacancies are, and then they're going to package all that together, put some numbers out, and then give you the value. On average, you can probably expect a commercial appraisal to be around $5,000. Their turnaround time is usually pretty long. I would probably budget around 4 weeks or so to get an appraisal back. Now, obviously, those numbers are going to change depending on how busy the appraiser is going to be and how the market is. It's also going to depend on what type of property you have. So if you look at it from an overview, all these appraisers usually have the similar processes when it comes to evaluating their commercial properties, right? But sometimes they arrive at different values. It's kind of confusing, right? Now why is that? Well, banks and brokers are generally told to steer clear from appraisers. Borrowers like you and me, we're not even allowed to talk to them about property values because the goal is to prevent any manipulation of property values. Now, in general, appraisers are going to try to please the lenders because those are the ones that are giving them business, right? But sometimes they might just have way too many properties on their plate. And they could be cutting corners, or they could be doing things a little bit more half-assed, or whatever reason. But sometimes they're looking at different data, and sometimes they see different things a little bit differently, and which is why you get differences in valuations. And speaking of valuations, let's talk about how these appraisers approach their valuations. Firstly, they have the income approach, which is pretty much the gold standard. They're going to dive deep into the potential of the property, and they're going to look at how much cash it could rake in, right? They're going to compare a couple of properties, maybe 4, maybe 6 other similar properties that were recently sold, and they're going to compare their cap rates with your property's cap rate. And these comparables should be twins in terms of, age, size, and the quality, with a little couple of small variances. They're going to average out the cap rates, and then they're going to blend it with your property's cap rate. And then that's when they get, the market average. So then they take that rate, and then they're going to multiply it by your NOI, or your net operating income, and then you get the property's value. Secondly, they're going to look at it from a cost approach. This is useful for new or one-of-a-kind properties. The cost approach is going to evaluate the current market cost of building the property from scratch. They're going to be looking at land prices, materials, labor, and then the construction as a whole. They might even look at a little bit of depreciation to give you the valuation of your building from a cost approach. And lastly, you have the comps approach. This is the same approach that you see in the residential world. They're going to sift through recent sales data of similar properties, and they're going to make adjustments for differences like a matchmaker considering interests and quirks. When they do that, they arrive at a similar price for your property. Think of it as like finding the property soulmate in the real estate market. So back to your lender real quick. They're going to base the financing of the appraised value rather than the contract price. Now, if the appraisal value is higher than your contract price, it's going to represent additional equity. However, if the appraisal value falls short, you might need to put in additional capital or renegotiate the purchase price with the seller. Either or, sometimes you're always going to get a value that you're not going to like. So the main question here is, what can you do to prevent the appraisal from affecting your loan negatively? You should consider collaborating with an experienced broker, real estate broker, to analyze comparable property sales from the past year or so to support your desired valuation. Now, you can share this information with your loan officer, and then you get input from, credit managers that are responsible for approving your loan. So by doing this, you're going to be setting clear expectations for your property's value, and if everyone agrees, they can advocate for a better appraisal if the initial report falls short. Now, you can always rebut, or I don't even know if that's a word, but give a rebuttal of what the valuation you think it to be is based on factual data. So this is why you get a comparable report on sales, or you can gather data on what these comparable properties are bringing in from an income approach. And or if you have some contractor friends, figure out what the cost is to build a brand new building of similar size and structure. So with all that data, that's how you kind of refute what the appraiser is presenting you if he presents a number that you do not like. And there you have it. Appraisals might not be the sexiest part about real estate, but they're super important, and you're going to run into them multiple times. But In essence, they give you the confidence to make informed decisions, and that, they're going to protect your lenders. And the next time you're in the market for a commercial property, make sure you've got a solid appraisal in your back pocket. It's going to be your ticket to closing smart deals. And that is a wrap up for today. I hope you guys found it useful. If there's any questions, reach out to me on IG, subscribe, leave a comment. Wonton out. And that's a wrap. If you've made it this far, that means you've listened to the entire episode, so thank you. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please leave a review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you're listening from. And if you've learned something or found it useful, share it with one of your homies. And if you want to get in touch with me, I'm pretty active on IG. My handle is pro_TANH. Reach out, let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, or what you want to hear about in the future. I'm here to tailor this to you. Until next time.